Okay, great, guys. Well, shall we move on to one thing we learned, which this week I think we were going to talk a little bit about the revelations that some of the leading clubs in the Premier League are pushing to reform the division. And the response to this has been mixed, I would say. So, obviously, as we know, the government essentially have asked that the larger clubs in the country, the Premier League clubs, provide money to the EFL clubs during this period of financial crisis. The government, they're doing their normal thing, which is not taking any responsibility themselves and asking that other people solve issues for them. And the Premier League seems to have taken this as an opportunity to try and cement their strength in other ways. So their current proposal would provide, I think, $250 million in bailout money, essentially, for EFL clubs. But what they want in return is an 18-team Premier League. They want to have strict control over things like broadcast rights and takeover bids. And they want to solidify power among the top teams within the Premier League as well. So at the moment, if you want to put through any strict reforms to the league, I think you need a 14 club. You need 14 clubs in the Premier League to vote for it, essentially a super majority. Whereas this, I think, would give more power to 9 teams who have had consistent runs in the Premier League. So obviously the traditional big powers plus a couple of others. Guys, I have no idea really where to start with this, except that it feels a little bit like the league has said, right, if you're going to make these demands from us, then we're going to take this opportunity to get something back in return. We know that you desperately need cash, but we're only going to give it to you if you pretty much give up any chance of reaching the top level in the long term.
Yeah. I'd say we've got to be kind of a bit careful because it's leaked documents and there's probably all sorts of legal proceedings. But I would say it's quite cheeky is a nice way of putting it from the top clubs, to be honest. They've utilised the situation and the need for funding in the EFL. It's weird that they weren't prepared to change the arrangements or just give it out on no condition. Instead, they've tried to change the entire structure of English football. How many teams are in each division, how relegation and promotion works in each division, and there are a lot of good proposals in this. I'm a fan of scrapping the Carabao Cup. I don't think anyone will really cry over that. Fan of scrapping the Community Shield. Reducing the amount of games has needed to be done for quite a while. But the idea that 6 big sides and plus 3 should have a controlling stake in the top division seems totally ridiculous, particularly when they're allocated on a particularly bizarre basis of longest runs in the division. Like, surely Leicester City should have a stake in it over West Ham, a club that has been complete turmoil over the last 5 or 6 years. It's been relegated twice in the last 10, I think. Whereas Leicester City have won the Premier League, established themselves as a top 10 side. Like, I don't feel there's much logic behind that. And for everyone being like, oh, West Ham have been in the top flight for longer. Well, on that basis, why are Man City in it then? Who have only really established themselves since being bought by a country. So I feel like there's so much good positives that they have come up with the proposals. And the EFL does need to be helped out massively. But I just feel like they've utilised their sort of struggle of the lower league clubs to try and basically assert themselves and put themselves at the top of the tree and basically pull up the drawbridge for any club trying to establish themselves in the top 6 mix. They're basically trying to turn it into a sort of La Liga light, where it seems like most of the control in La Liga goes to Barcelona and Real Madrid in terms of broadcasting rights, allocation of money. And it feels like Liverpool and Man United, who proposed this deal, have tried to create that as well. So I think this is potentially really dangerous. But it is just leaked emails at the moment.
Yeah.
And we don't know how far along it is. And I'm sure there was going to be discussion about how it would work out. But I do go into this with a bit of trepidation.
Definitely. I think, if it is, if what we've read is true, it's it is pretty worrying. But like, I think, the proposal to make it an 18-team Premier League, I think that would instantly plunge 2 League 2 sides into the non-league if it were to happen. Mm-hmm. Parachute payments, I think, would be scrapped as well.
Yeah.
So obviously getting relegated from the Premier League suddenly becomes a much more problematic thing. And I think, one of the positive things, although, it kind of made a lot of championship teams kind of put them more on the level of Premier League teams, and potentially, you know, wasn't really much of a help to, you know, hasn't necessarily helped League One and League Two. It's probably, if anything, kind of just put the plight of clubs lower down the divisions into starker contrast. But I think the parachute payments generally, like over the years, have meant that the competition in the Championship has got better and the quality of teams in the Championship has got better. So I think that's something that is highly contentious, I think. Yeah, it does feel exploitative, doesn't it? Like, I mean, it's not like the EFL, like clubs lower down in the EFL haven't needed help before. Like, where was this kind of, when like for example, Macclesfield, who were the kind of final nail in the coffin was the pandemic, but they've been struggling really badly for like the last 12 months. I just feel like, it just does feel like quite opportunistic. At least like you're saying, Dougie, at least from what we know at the moment, it feels quite opportunistic. But yeah, I think like you're saying, there's some decent things there. It's just the trade-off just seems massive. Like you can do those things without completely restructuring like English football, because we know like whatever happens in the Premier League always has massive ramifications for the rest of the country.
Yeah, and I mean, so in some regards, you could say it looked quite generous on the face of it. Like, yes, parachute payments would be scrapped, but on the other hand, I think a quarter of Premier League TV revenue would be disseminated among the EFL clubs, right? But in a way, I feel like it's maybe looking at things the wrong way, because to me, English clubs have arguably the greatest asset in football, which is that they have probably the most in-demand global football product. And it doesn't seem really like these proposals are based around safeguarding that product as entertainment. Like, what's going to determine overall the value of the TV deal and the value of these clubs ultimately is whether people want to watch the league, whether people are excited and entertained by the league. And I think all these things are going to make the league probably more predictable and more boring. I mean, except the odd thing. Like, so for instance, the idea that the bottom two clubs at the end of a season get relegated and the third from bottom club go into the Championship playoffs, I think that's a great idea.
Yeah, that's quite exciting.
That's really fun, that's entertaining, and I think it's only fair that teams that have performed over a 46-game season in the Championship get a shot at teams which have underperformed in the Premier League, and despite having a lot more money. Though on the other hand, if the Premier League is then a 34-game season and the Championship is a 46-game season, then you say, well, what are the odds that these teams are actually able to compete with Premier League sides, no matter how badly those sides have done? I mean, it just feels a bit... I don't get excited thinking about it. In the same way that the European Super League, there's no part of me really that wants to watch it. It doesn't excite me more than the Champions League does, really.
But even the relegation concept would actually... It sounds like it gives the Championship clubs more chance, but actually it doesn't, because that third bottom side in the Premier League, before it changed to 18, would instantly be relegated automatically, and there'd be 4 teams in the playoffs in the Championship, whereas in this way, there'd be 3 teams from the Championship and 1 team from the Premier League. So it's actually not really creating any better odds. And I think you raising the European Super League is absolutely vital in this. It feels like the top clubs in the Premier League are basically clearing space in the football calendar to allow an expanded Champions League or a European Super League, just to try and increase their coffers, because they know that's where it's eventually going. So they're dressing it up as charity, but I feel like there's potentially some other motives at play.
And pre-season friendlies as well. Pre-season friendlies are very lucrative for clubs, even though fans don't give a shit about them. Like, I mean, it's just really difficult. And I don't know, to me, it feels a little bit like the way that universities conceive of international students, where they're like, international students are how we make our money. And so as a result, that's what we care about. But ultimately, it's not the thing that's going to be best for the club's financial future or for the fans of those clubs, I think. Well, I think that...